There's a specific kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much sleep you got. It's the exhaustion of checking your bank balance before you buy a coffee, of doing math in your head at the grocery store, item by item, before you even reach the register, of lying awake at 2 in the morning, replaying a bill you already know you can't pay. This isn't laziness, and it isn't a lack of willpower. It's what happens to the human brain when money runs out. And science has spent the last 2 decades proving that being broke doesn't just strain your wallet, it rewires the way you think.
For most of modern history, poverty was treated as a purely economic problem, something that could be fixed with the right policy, the right job, the right amount of effort. What we've learned more recently is that scarcity, the ongoing experience of not having enough, changes cognitive function itself. Researchers studying poverty and decision-making have found that the constant mental load of financial stress behaves almost like a tax on the brain, quietly draining the same mental bandwidth people need for memory, focus, and long-term planning. It's not that people living paycheck to paycheck are making worse decisions because they're less capable. It's that a huge portion of their cognitive resources are already being spent every single day on the simple act of surviving.
Think about what your brain actually has to track when money is tight. Which bill is due first? How much is left until the next paycheck? Whether the car will make it another week without repairs? Whether skipping a meal today means there's enough for the kids tomorrow? None of this looks dramatic from the outside. There's no single catastrophic moment. It's a low, constant hum of calculation running in the background of every single day. And that hum takes up space, real, measurable cognitive space. Studies have shown that this kind of chronic financial stress can reduce what researchers call fluid intelligence, the ability to solve new problems and think flexibly, in ways comparable to losing an entire night of sleep. Being broke doesn't just feel exhausting. Neurologically, it functions like exhaustion.
This is where the mental health consequences start to compound. Anxiety thrives on uncertainty, and financial insecurity is uncertainty in its purest form. You don't know if your income will cover next month's expenses. You don't know if an unexpected expense, a medical bill, a car repair, a rent increase, is about to arrive and blow up whatever fragile balance you've managed to maintain. The human nervous system isn't built to sit in that kind of prolonged uncertainty calmly. It responds the way it would to any other ongoing threat, staying activated, alert, and tense, long after the danger of any single moment has passed. Over time, that chronic activation is strongly associated with elevated rates of anxiety and depression, not as a character flaw, but as a predictable biological response to sustained stress.
There's also a piece of this that rarely gets talked about openly, and that's shame. Financial struggle in most modern societies isn't just an economic condition. It's treated as a moral one. People who are broke are often quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, judged as having failed at something everyone else has figured out. That judgment gets internalized. It shows up as people avoiding social situations because they can't afford to participate. It shows up as people lying about their financial situation to friends and family, not because they're dishonest, but because the truth feels unbearable to say out loud. It shows up as people isolating themselves entirely, cutting off the very relationships that might otherwise support them through a hard financial period, simply because the shame of being seen struggling feels worse than the loneliness of hiding it. That isolation matters more than it might seem. Financial stress rarely stays contained to just the bank account. It bleeds into relationships. Money is one of the most common sources of conflict between partners, and that conflict tends to intensify, not ease, when resources are scarce. Small disagreements about spending can escalate quickly when every dollar feels like it's being fought over out of necessity rather than preference. Parents under financial strain often report feeling like they don't have the emotional bandwidth left to be as present as they want to be for their kids. Not because they don't care,
but because so much of their mental energy is already being consumed elsewhere. The stress doesn't stay in one place. It moves through every relationship a person has.
There's a cruel irony here, too. The financial decisions people make under chronic stress often make things worse. Not because they're careless, but because scarcity forces short-term thinking. When your brain is consumed with surviving this week, planning 5 years ahead feels impossible, even when that's exactly what would solve the problem. Payday loans, missed chances to save, trading a bigger future cost for smaller relief now. These aren't failures of intelligence. They're what happens when a brain is forced to prioritize right now over eventually, because the immediate threat always feels bigger than the distant one, even when it isn't. Researchers call this a scarcity mindset, and it's not a personality trait, it's a response. Studies comparing the same people before and after financial hardship find their decision-making shifts substantially with the pressure they're under. This isn't about who someone is, it's about what conditions they're in. Someone who seems impulsive during a crisis may make far more measured decisions once that pressure lifts, because the stress changed, not their character. The physical toll matters too. Chronic financial stress is linked to elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, weakened immunity, and higher risk of high blood pressure and heart disease. Sleep in particular creates a brutal feedback loop. Stress makes it harder to sleep, poor sleep makes it harder to think clearly and regulate emotions, and those worse decisions compound the very pressure that caused the sleeplessness. It's not one problem. It's a cycle that reinforces itself until something from outside breaks it.
What makes this so difficult is how invisible it is. Someone struggling financially usually looks completely fine, still going to work, still showing up to family events, quietly declining to split a bill they can't afford. There's no cast or bandage to signal something's wrong. Shame keeps it hidden, which means the people around them often have no idea how much they're carrying, making it even easier to feel completely alone in it. So what helps? Nothing here fully solves the structural problems behind financial hardship, but a few things consistently make a difference. Naming the stress matters. Financial anxiety is a real documented response, not a personal failing, and knowing that can ease the shame. Even modest financial stability measurably reduces cognitive load, which is part of why direct cash assistance studies show improvements not just in security, but in mental health and decision-making, even at small dollar amounts. Money doesn't magically fix psychological distress. It frees up mental space that was being spent entirely on survival.
Social connection matters too, even though isolation is the instinctive response. Talking openly with even one trusted person about financial struggle is linked to lower stress, largely because it breaks the cycle of shame-driven secrecy. Professional support, financial counseling, or mental health support for stress and anxiety can help interrupt scarcity's short-term thinking, creating space to decide based on where you want to be, not just where you're standing. None of this erases the structural forces behind financial hardship. Wages, housing, healthcare, inequality. No mindset shift solves a problem built into the economy itself. But understanding the psychology of being broke reframes the experience.